is advised.
Now I lay me down to sleep.
Now I lay me down to sleep.
Pray the Lord my soul to keep.
Pray the Lord my soul to keep.
If I die before I wake,
If I die before I wake,
pray the Lord my soul to take.
pray the Lord my soul to take.
Now I lay me down to sleep.
Now I lay me down to sleep.
Pray the Lord my soul to keep.
Pray the Lord my soul to keep.
If I die before I wake,
If I die before I
pray
wake,
the Lord my soul to take.
pray the Lord my soul to take.
Mothers are like angels, or the human form of God on this very earth for us. A mother's love will never end. It is there from the beginning to the end. A mother's love is beyond comparison. It is the greatest unconditional and infinite love we will ever experience in our existence. Then there's Yolanda Pena. Delilah Urrutia Pena was born on May 14, 2006. She was the product of an affair her mother Yolanda had while married. She also had two sisters named Jenny and Jasmine. Jasmine and Jenny both knew Pena had an affair with a man named Daniel. Jasmine told her father, and he divorced Pena.
I'm horny.
When Delilah was 4 or 5 months old, a friend of Yolanda's named Sylvia Uribe began babysitting Delilah. Sometimes Delilah was with Sylvia for days at a time, and over time, Sylvia and Delilah developed a very strong bond which grew to the point that Delilah did not want to go home with Pena. Eventually, Delilah began living with the Uribe family on a full-time basis, and Pena agreed that the Uribe family could adopt the child. However, in connection with the planned adoption, the Uribe family wanted to change Delilah's name to Myra, but Pena objected. This disagreement over the child's name led Pena to change her mind about the adoption, and the Uribes returned Delilah to Pena's care. Yolanda was a very self-centered and vindictive person. She had a hard time as a single mother and blamed two people in her life for all her troubles. She blamed Jasmine for the dissolution of her marriage and referred to Jasmine as trash. She also blamed Delilah because she believed Delilah was the reason her husband would not reconcile with her. She referred to Delilah as it. When it came to punishments in the household, they were unusually cruel and severe, especially for Delilah and Jasmine. Jasmine would have to clean all the walls in the house and would be beaten for lying. On almost a daily basis, Jasmine was forced to kneel on rice or concrete with her hands on her head for periods of time longer than 30 minutes. If Jasmine put her hands down, Pena would beat Jasmine with a coaxial cable or a plastic coat hanger. Jasmine and Delilah were not allowed to look or talk to Pena or Jenny. They were not allowed to call Pena Mom or Yolanda. Pena would sometimes shave Delilah's head and call her Daniel, and in response, Delilah would cry and say that her name was Delilah.
Hi, my name is. What? My name is.
If Jasmine expressed sympathy for Delilah, Pena would hit Jasmine and beat the hell out of her. At first, when Delilah returned home from the failed adoption, Delilah was allowed to sleep on Pena's bed. But Pena eventually made her sleep on the floor on a towel and sometimes tied her to the couch. The middle daughter, Jenny, was treated better than her sisters and was considered the princess of the family. She was expected to report any misbehavior by her sister to Pena, which included Jasmine having fun while visiting her father or criticizing Pena. But when any of the three girls, including Jenny, got into trouble, Pena would pepper spray them or hit them with hangers, the heel of a high-heeled shoe, or a coaxial cable. In addition to kneeling for extended periods, Pena began making Jasmine walk around the house on her knees, causing the child's knees to bruise, bleed, and scar. Delilah was not required to get on her knees. Instead, as punishment for infractions of the house rules, she was forced to walk around the house in the walking pattern for hours on end. Pena also used food to punish Jasmine and Delilah. She mixed a concoction of beans, 2 kinds of bread, hot sauce, a can of chili, and an egg, which Jasmine hated, and forced the 2 girls to eat it. If they did not eat it, or if they spit it out or vomited, Pena pepper sprayed them. Pena also subjected Jasmine and Delilah to 3 other forms of cruel discipline: hot needles, drenching them with boiling water and ice water, and restraining them with belts, ties, ropes, shoestrings, and duct tape. Pena would heat the needles on the stove and put the needles on Jasmine and Delilah's skin, causing them to scream in agony. Pena would leave the needles on the girls until the needles cooled. On a regular basis, she would boil water in pots on the stove, pour it into the bathtub, and then force either Jasmine or Delilah, who were naked, to sit in the tub with their hands on the bottom of the tub. When the girls were sitting in the tub, Pena would also take a cup and pour the boiled water over them so that their entire bodies could feel the hot water. Pena would sometimes have Jenny the princess participate in pouring hot water over her sisters. When Jasmine would attempt to resist sitting in the tub, Pena would beat her head and face and throw her against the wall. One time after beating, Pena split Jasmine's lip. Alternatively, Pena would fill the bathtub with cold ice and water and force either Jasmine or Delilah to get into the bathtub naked again and put their hands on the bottom of the tub. Pena or Jenny would then use a cup to pour ice water over the girls' heads. Delilah would calmly accept the ice water, but Jenny saw her shiver, her skin turn gray, and her lips turn purple. Pena would also punish Delilah by sticking her head in the toilet and forcing it underwater. Pena did this until she could hear the sound of bubbles. When Pena left the house, she would tie Jasmine up with tape and rope and put her in the closet. Jasmine's hand would be tied to a railing at the top of the closet, and she would be forced to kneel in the closet the entire time Pena was gone. The restraints used on little Delilah were more extreme. For a week at a time, Delilah would be tied up to a faucet in a bar, and because of the length of time she was restrained, Delilah would defecate and urinate in her pants. When Delilah was released, Pena would force Jasmine to clean up the mess. Other times, Pena would put a sock in Delilah's mouth, put duct tape over her mouth, tie her hands and feet with shoelaces, or ties and duct tape, put her in a plastic tub, then put her in the closet. Pena and Jenny would then leave the house with Delilah tied up in the closet. The constant binding of Delilah's little hands was so severe that she lost circulation in 2 of her fingers on her left hand, and they began to shrivel and turn black. When this happened, Pena used scissors to cut off the ends of the 2 fingers. On the evening of June 25, 2009, Jenny was at home watching Delilah while Pena was at work. One of Pena's house rules prohibited 3-year-old Delilah from either speaking or looking at Jenny or Pena. Delilah broke this rule and Jenny called her mother and reported Delilah's behavior. Pena told Jenny that she needed to force Delilah to start walking around the house in a fixed pattern. Pena and Pena's best friend Lorena also told Jenny to heat up a cup of water in the microwave every 15 minutes and throw it on Delilah. Jenny did as she was told, but the cup of water was so hot she had to use a towel to take it out of the microwave. Pena told Jenny that if Delilah looked at Jenny again, Jenny was to beat Delilah in the buttocks. Pena also instructed Jenny to write down what Delilah had done wrong and write down every time Jenny poured hot water on Delilah. Jenny complied with her mother's instructions because she was afraid of what would happen to her if she did not. When Pena came home, Jenny reported that Delilah had looked at her again. Pena did not bat an eye to Delilah's scalded face and body. She was enraged that Delilah had looked at Jenny. Pena went to her bedroom and retrieved a high-heeled shoe. Pena then started hitting Delilah in the head with the heel of the shoe. Pena then threw Delilah against the wall and repeatedly hit her in the head approximately 20 more times. When she was done beating Delilah, she bound the child's wrists, ankles, and face with duct tape, put pantyhose over her head, put her in a plastic tub, then put the plastic tub in the closet. Pena then went to dinner with her best friend Lorena and Jenny. When Pena and Jenny returned from dinner, Jenny went straight to her room. But a few minutes later, when she came out of the room, she saw Delilah laying motionless on a towel in the hallway. Pena took the duct tape off Delilah and told Jenny to hide it. Pena called her friend Lorena and asked her what to do. Pena told Jenny to check for a pulse. When Jenny confirmed Delilah did not have a pulse, Lorena told Pena to call police, and Pena did. Before the emergency response team arrived, Pena told Jenny to tell them that Delilah had repeatedly hit herself, that she was a bad girl, and that she had dropped a pot of hot water on herself. At approximately 10 p.m., the CAL FIRE emergency response team arrived at Pena's home in Riverside County. They were met by Pena and Jenny at the door. Pena and Jenny pointed the team down the hallway where they found Delilah. Delilah was on her back, dead. Her body was cold to the touch, and rigor mortis had already set in. Delilah's arms were stiff and upright at a 90-degree angle from her body.
A right angle is equal to 90 degrees.
Pena then told the response team, "It always got what it wanted. It never did what it was told. It always had its way." Pena held on to Jenny the princess and would not permit her to be questioned by herself. When a member of the response team asked Jenny what happened, she stated she was watching cartoons when Delilah's body was discovered. Jenny said the body had been discovered around noon and that the baby needed cooling off. When the medics asked why they didn't call at noon when they found Delilah, neither Pena or Jenny could explain why it had taken so long to summon help. And at that point, Pena screamed. It needed cooling off. It needed help. An autopsy showed that Delilah died as a result of continuous blunt force trauma inflicted to her head. The examination showed she had suffered significant brain trauma and numerous bruises, impact marks, and cuts all over her head and eyes, as well as subdural bleeding. The examination also showed that Delilah's cheeks were bruised and missing skin. The examination also disclosed significant recent burns on the anterior portions of Delilah's left and right arms. The burns were so serious that in those areas Delilah's skin had begun to slough off. In addition to showing the cause of death, the autopsy showed that before her death, and over a significant period of time, Delilah had been subjected to severe physical abuse. Her chest was covered with second-degree burns and blistering. Her wrists, legs, knees, and feet had significant scarring, bruising, and abrasions consistent with being struck or whipped with a cord or clothes hanger. Delilah's left hand and thumb were so scarred that her hand could no longer be opened but was in a permanent claw-like position. Scars on Delilah's thumb had fused it to the palm of her hand. The examination showed that 2 of the fingers on Delilah's left hand had been partially amputated as a result of some non-medical intervention or occurrence. Only 1 of 3 bones in her left pinky remained in her hand, and only 2 of 3 bones remained in her left ring finger. The second bone of her ring finger was protruding out of her skin, and at the time of the examination had turned brown due to exposure to air. Delilah weighed 28 pounds at the time of her death. On June 30th, 2009, Pena was interviewed by detectives at the Indio Sheriff Station. Pena attempted to explain Delilah's death and evidence of burns on her body by stating that, on the day of Delilah's death, after Pena had come home from work, Delilah had a tantrum and began throwing herself against a wall and pulled a bowl of hot water off a counter onto herself. Pena tried to explain other older burns by stating Delilah had been burned by a candle. When confronted with evidence that Delilah had severe bruises and scars on the back of her legs, Pena suggested the possibility that they had been inflicted by Jenny. At the end of the interview, Yolanda Pena was placed under arrest. At her trial, her defense attorney, Thomas Kavanaugh, conceded there was abuse in the household, but told jurors that it was most likely that Todd had hit her head on the floor more than once while fleeing from her sister. And by the time Yolanda got home, this child was in a very bad way. The only thing Yolanda did wrong was not get medical help for Delilah, and there was no excuse for that. But those head injuries were caused before Miss Pena got home, and Delilah's burns from microwave water that day were not given at her mother's directions. She did not inflict the injuries that caused her child's death. He said there are big questions about that date and lack of forensic evidence. He asked the jurors to consider manslaughter instead of murder. The jury deliberated for 3 days before reaching a verdict. Yolanda Pena was convicted of first-degree murder, torture, assaulting a child causing great bodily injury, and inflicting injury on a child. At her sentencing, both of her daughters gave impact statements. Jasmine said, "Mom, you have changed my life in a big way. I want to tell you you're still my mother. I hope and pray God we can help you." Jenny said, "It hurts to me that you forced me to hurt my sisters. You made me question myself. I love you because you're still my mother. But you not only took away my little sister, you took away my mom. I forgive you, but I will never forget." Yolanda Pena looked away while both her daughters spoke in court. Riverside County Superior Court Judge James Hawkins said that this was probably the worst crime he had seen in his 17 years on the bench. "I don't know how one human being can do that to another." Yolanda Pena received 25 years to life for the murder of her daughter Delilah, and a life sentence for the torture and assault of a child causing great bodily injury and inflicting injury on a child for the abuse of her daughter Jasmine. Both sentences will be served consecutively, with the possibility of parole.
Welcome to my channel. This is Mr. Scary. Hope you enjoy the show.